Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits, with an enormous weekend of football and other sports, of course. I'll have everything you need to hear to get your sports fix in and then some, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who have been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we're on the cusp of not just a big weekend, not even an enormous weekend, as I just mentioned a moment ago, how about a ginormous weekend? To the point where I'm sure there are a lot of men and women, can't forget them, that have to break the news, if they haven't done so already, to their partners, girlfriends, wives, boyfriends, husbands, etc., to explain that starting this evening, from 7:30 p.m. till about, I'll say, 11:45 Monday evening, there are, count them, 8 football games between that time frame. And how do you get to explain that to your significant other, that there are 8 football games to be watched, and especially with what it is that I do when it comes to putting out podcasts and content that has to do with what's happening on a day in, day out basis when it comes to sports? It is not only just a dice roll, but it is almost a snowball's chance in hell that I will be, sure, hon, you can have the remote, the TV, let me break out the ottoman, put your feet up. You can just totally absorb every snap of football over the next, count them, 5 nights. Boy, is that a challenge unto itself? Well, that's what's going to happen here as we get ready to unpack everything that's happening. And yes, I should probably start with the college football, considering that there is a game tonight where you have Miami and Ole Miss, and then you also have Oregon and Indiana. 2 fascinating games, and I'm going to go from it a perspective of making a case for all 4 teams getting to and winning a national championship. But I'm going to talk about that second only because the NFL is going to be front and center. I got to talk about the pros before I get to the college. And trust me, I'll make sure to break it all down and give you a prediction, etc. when it comes to the college football playoff semifinal. But I have to start off with the NFL because with the wild card weekend being in the back end of it, the back 6 games, because you got tonight, tomorrow with the college football, and then you have 2 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday, 1 game Monday night, which will cap off the final 6 games of this 8-game, I can't even call it what, I guess it's an octuple header, if there's such a thing. I mean, I don't even know. But the storylines for this wild card weekend, and I think they're pretty simple. And there are 3 teams that I'm going to have to take out that aren't a part of this equation, which I'll talk about in the back end, so you're going to have to hold on to your hat there. But to me, I think the first storyline of this weekend, and it involves 3 teams. New England, Chicago, and to a certain extent, Jacksonville. And the reason why I bring up those 3 teams is because New England with Drake May, who is an MVP candidate, and a guy that a lot of people love his poise, they love his leadership and what he's done there in the 2 years that he's been a member of the Patriots, and even more so this year under the coaching performance of Mike Vrabel and turning that franchise around 4-13 to, what were they this year, 14-3. Just a tremendous job by him, and really to no surprise because we knew that Mike Vrabel was a very good coach there in his years in Tennessee before that fizzled out. And now that they're in the playoffs and have a game there Sunday night, which of course I'll break down, but between what we've seen in Chicago with first-time and first-year head coach Ben Johnson, and also Caleb Williams, who was the number 1 pick in the draft last year, same class as Drake May, as we know. And what are we going to see from the Bear team, knowing what they have done, as I call them, they're this year's, or really they were last year's Washington Commanders, but they're this year's Commanders in that regard, and how they're going to fare in a home game in their building, which is going to be a raucous crowd, where their heated rivals, the Packers, are going to come to town. And this is the third time they're going to face each other in what, a 6-week span? So we've seen this movie before, more so recently, how that's going to play up and build leading into the game there Saturday night on Amazon is going to be interesting. And then you have Jacksonville, where Trevor Lawrence, who isn't getting any MVP love, although he should, considering that they're 9-1 in the last 10 games, and they have been just a big-time force here, especially in the second half, winning in Denver, with that being the big win during that streak. And for Trevor Lawrence, coming out of college, Clemson, winning a national title, the long blonde hair, a guy that I don't want to say was can't miss, but was close to can't miss that we've seen in quite some time. And now he's back in the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. And in the first go-around, he had to come back from a 27-0 deficit. Maybe that's more of an indictment on the Chargers than it was Jacksonville. But then the following week, played well in Kansas City, although lost in that divisional playoff matchup. But I look at those three teams as one only because, A, they're all playing at home. B, the expectation level, although I'm sure in their respective cities are high, but because there are other teams that I'm going to talk about in particular, which I'll get to in my second and third point, but because these teams have not really been on anybody's radar over the last few years, and now that they're front and center as high seeds in their respective conferences, what we're going to see from them here in this opening round is fascinating. I want to see what Jacksonville is going to do, especially with Buffalo coming in, and I'm going to get to them in a moment. I want to see what the Bears are going to do, considering that the year that they had, and look at what Washington did last year. Think about it. They were 12-5, got to a conference championship game, but 2 of those games they won on the road. They didn't even have a home game, where the Bears have a home game and could actually have 2 when it's all said and done. And then there's New England. After the Belichick drama, him leaving, Gerard Mayo coming in for 1 year, disaster, Vrabel, Drake May second year, and here they are as a 2 seed, and they could also host 2 games in their building before maybe going to Denver or even hosting an AFC Championship game if they get that far. So to me, that is storyline number 1 with those 3 teams. Storyline number 2 has to be the Buffalo Bills. And the reason why I say that is because this is a year where no Patrick Mahomes, no Kansas City Chiefs, which obviously has been their kryptonite. To a lesser degree, because they have beaten Lamar Jackson in the past, in the COVID year, and then obviously last year in the conference semifinals, divisional round. But for Josh Allen, I understand a tough task there to go to Jacksonville. Not to say that Jacksonville the world beaters, but they have had a good year, as I just detailed. But the fascinating thing about this team is that I almost think it's feast or famine. I think that if they win this game, they could get to a Super Bowl. I'm not saying they will. They could get there. But then I could also see them losing this game, and then that's it. What's going to happen? Does Sean McDermott get fired? I understand they're moving into a new building next year. Maybe they want to have a new face of their franchise when it comes to their head coach. Who knows? But there's going to be a lot of rumblings about McDermott's job status after this week, whether or not he's going to be there and whether or not that the Bills are going to have a long playoff run in front of them. Because a lot of people think that with them being a 6 seed, and although having to go on the road to get to a Super Bowl, it looks like that with football, with sports, and even when you tempt, I don't want to say fate, but sometimes the harder path is the one that's going to finally overcome and win that championship. And I say that with so many different examples. You can look at the Steelers as a 6 seed, winning the Super Bowl back 20 years ago. This time when they went on that run to beat the Seahawks in Super Bowl 40. The Giants, when they won in Tampa, won in Dallas, won in Green Bay, and then they beat the 17-0 or 18-0 at the time Patriots to win a Super Bowl. And of course, their last Super Bowl win was 1990, which was, do my math, 18 years prior to that. Then you had the Packers, where they were a 6 seed. They had to win in Philadelphia, win in Atlanta, and Atlanta was a 1 seed, and then win at Chicago to get themselves to a Super Bowl, and then they beat the Steelers that year. And of course, the Packers hadn't won a Super Bowl since the 96 season. Do that math, that's what, 14 years. So, Buffalo, we know that they've never won a Super Bowl. Haven't been to a Super Bowl since the 92 season. Or was it 93? 93, because, right, they went, 90, 91, 92, 90. So the 93 season. And now, like I said, they could be one and done, or they may have a Super Bowl run in front of them. And that's what's fascinating in that regard. So that is my second storyline. My third storyline has to be the Eagles. And I understand you could probably put them as the 2, considering that they're the defending champ. But it's that game of which team is it? Is it the team that's going to defend their title and maybe somehow find a way where Saquon Barkley will have a big game and Jalen Hurts in the passing game will click, and their defense, which their defense is pretty good, but we all know it's all about their offense. And which team are we going to see? Now they're going up against a Niner team that offensively, and I understand they're nicked up and Trent Williams and their defense is decimated. I get it. But the Niners aren't going to be afraid to go into Philadelphia. Remember, they won in the regular season a couple of years ago. Granted, it's 2 years, and I understand there was Debo and a bunch of other people. But it's not as if the Niners are chopped liver. So with the Eagles, are we going to see the team that, all right, they're going to walk out of Lincoln Financial Field there sometime around 7:30, something to 8 Sunday night, and come away with a rocking chair-esque 24-13 type win? Or is it going to be a thing where the Eagles are going to battle it out and they're going to win on a last-second Jake Elliott field goal, or worse, may not come out of that game alive? So, to me, I think that's another intriguing angle when it comes to not only just a defending champ, but an Eagle team that has been up and down. Start off 8-2. They beat big-time teams early on in the year. Then they went into that 3-game stretch where they lost 3 games in a row, and you kind of thought, they're going to let the division slip through their hands and have the Cowboys come back. And then, of course, the Cowboys faded away, and the Eagles ended out the season on a strong note. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen with the Eagles, and I think that's very interesting. And then you have my last storyline is the Houston Texans. I bring them up because they've won 9 straight. Remember, this team started off 0-3. So when you do the math, they ended their season winning 9 in a row, 12-2 to close out their season. And with their defense led by Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter and Derek Stingley and their other corner Lassiter, they have an excellent defense. And I understand there's going to be a faction of people in Denver to say we have the best defense in the sport, but obviously H-Town are going to say, we have the best defense. And with them winning 9 in a row, if they're even thinking about getting to, let's say, a conference championship, which the franchise has never done, they're going to have to win 11 games. And oh, by the way, they have to do it on the road, which is something that in their history, they've had a ton of wildcard games in their building, which they've won, but then they go on the road in the next round and go up in smoke. Where this time around, they have to go on the road to Pittsburgh, a team that, let's face it, they thank their lucky stars that Tyler Luke missed that field goal that would have closed out their season. And who knows, maybe even Mike Tomlin's career for that matter. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later on with the losing team of that game. But how I look at it is that the Texans, for all of what they've done after that slow start, now let's see them when the lights are really bright, how they're going to react against a Steeler team that's going to get DK Metcalf back, but a young offensive line and Aaron Rodgers, I understand he could slip and move and maybe once in the blue could scramble for a few yards, but certainly not the Aaron Rodgers that we've come to know and love in his days when he was wearing the green and gold. So those are my storylines. And the 3 other teams, or one game and the others that I'm not going to really pay much mind, Pittsburgh's not a storyline here. I understand this could be Aaron Rodgers' last game come Monday night, and that's going to be the theme going in, and certainly if the Steelers lose. But let's face it, and I get it, Pittsburgh hasn't won a playoff game and it's going on a decade. But this isn't going to be an easy game for them. And I'll talk about the games in a minute as I break it down. But to me, it's not about the Steelers. Yeah, it could be about Tomlin, maybe his future, but I'm not looking at it from that regard, because to me, those other storylines are more at the forefront than if the Steelers lose that game, or do they have a run in them, etc. The Niners are the same way. They're decimated by injury. They've had a very good year despite all the guys that have been out of the lineup. And is it a tall order to go into Philadelphia to win? I'm not going to say that based on what I said about Philadelphia just a couple of minutes ago. But if the Niners lose, let's say, they lose 23-14, is anybody going to bat an eyelash? Is anyone going to say, oh, the Niners, what a bad year? No, I can see them if they lose a close game, or let's say they had the lead early and they spit the bit, then you could say, oh, wow, what happened to the Niners and Shanahan, etc. But nobody's going to get on the Niners if they lose this game. And then the other game is, which I'll start there and I'll segue, is Rams and Carolina. Now, obviously it'd be a story if the Rams lose, but a lot of people think with them being a 10-point favorite on the road and Carolina backing into the playoffs, and even though the Panthers beat the Rams at, I believe it was the Sunday after Thanksgiving, can the Rams actually do this twice in a, 7-8 week span? I don't think so. I cannot see it happening. So therefore, Carolina's not a theme. The Rams, I understand that they could be a storyline. 5 seed, can they get to a Super Bowl? Matthew Stafford, the likely MVP of the league. But let's see them get past this first game, and then we can talk about the storylines for next Thursday, because obviously I'm not going to bring up Denver or Seattle right now. They have byes, so they're going to be put on ice for a week. But when we revisit our storylines for the divisional round and beyond, then we can see if the Rams do advance as we would all expect them to, then we could certainly unpack that and discuss it at that time. So now to segue to the games Saturday, Rams and Carolina. I don't know what to expect from the Panthers. Maybe they'll put forth a very good defensive effort. Remember, in the game in late November, Matthew Stafford had 3 turnovers. I believe, did he have 3 interceptions? I think he had 3 turnovers total. Did not play well, which was obviously a big catalyst in the Panthers winning. Do I see that formula happening again? I do not. That's not to say that they're not going to get after Stafford, or he may not have as many turnovers, but hey, he could turn the ball over. Stafford can be a pick-6 machine at times, but I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if Carolina wins this game. I'm sure the league, if you put Truth Serum, I don't even think you need Truth Serum. If the powers that be in the NFL offices down on Park Avenue, if Carolina advances to the next round, they're going to be sick to their stomachs. They want to see the Rams in the next round, quite possibly playing the Seattle Seahawks. Because if it's going to be Carolina, they're going to be spitting up, and the game starts at 4:30, so it'll be dinner time. Yeah, they're going to be spitting up their kale salads and their roasted sweet potato with the Malbec going down rather roughly there around 8 p.m. if Carolina has 1 point more than the LA Rams do there late Saturday afternoon into the early evening. That's all there is to it. And I think the Rams will win this game. I don't know if it's going to be comfortably. I can see Carolina being a pest, but I think the Rams will win this game, I don't know, 27-17. Maybe I'll give them 17 points, Carolina. But yeah, I'd be shocked if Carolina's in the game fourth quarter. How about that? As far as the night game, Green Bay, Chicago, Saturday night. We've seen this movie before recently. All the games were close. Think about it. The Packers should have swept the season series, but then the Bears could have said the same thing, because remember, Caleb Williams threw that interception at 28-21 in Lambeau where they could have tied the game, and who knows, it may have gone for 2 to win the game at that point. So the Bear fan could certainly come out to say, well, wait a minute, we could have swept in our own right if we would have gotten that touchdown. But then the same could be said on the other side, because they got the onside kick at 16-9, and they were able to get the touchdown to tie the game and win in overtime. I think it was 16-9 to score. So for this game Saturday night, I know a lot of it's going to be on the shoulders of Caleb Williams. And who knows with Jordan Love? He's coming back from the injured list, him being in concussion protocol. Who knows how effective he'll be. But I would have to say and think, as much as that crowd's going to be behind their home team, the last time they had a home game was that the double doink game where, who was the kicker at that time? Was it Cody Parker? Cody Parkey, I think his name was, or Cody Parker. The double doink off of the upright and the crossbar. where Philly went in there and beat the Bears. I'm sure it's going to be a rabid scene there, and who knows what the weather's going to be like. I'm sure it's going to be cold, maybe snow, who knows. But the Packers, I understand that they came into this postseason wounded. They've lost 4 in a row, no Micah Parsons, etc. But somehow, some way, I can see the Packers eking out a win here. I can almost see the Bears come out flying, and then they get a little bit stale, and then the Packers hang around, and the next thing you know, Jordan Love is finding Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs in the end zone, and then the next thing you know, they're down by 4, and here comes Caleb Williams, and he throws an ill-advised pick. I could see Green Bay win this 24-19, somewhere along those lines. And who knows how Love's going to be? I can't tell you. God forbid he takes one shot and then that's it. Here comes Malik Willis. Sunday, Buffalo, Jacksonville. Fascinating game. Again, as much as I feel in my gut that Buffalo's going to win, I think they will, but I'm shortchanging Jacksonville because they've had a big year. And I understand that's not really a big home field advantage. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills Mafia invade and averted. They're probably purchasing tickets as I'm speaking, where they're trying to get themselves down to Jacksonville. The weather may be tricky there because I know January in the northeast part of Florida, it's not going to be 75, 80 degrees. You may have a game time temperature in the 50s, which for Buffalo, that would bode well for them. In fact, they probably want it even colder because the Jaguar players aren't familiar or used to playing in in those elements. So something tells me that Buffalo's going to find a way. Now, if Jacksonville's going to win this game, they're going to have to play from in front, I think. And that's not to say that they can't come from behind. I understand 100%. But I really, truly believe that if Buffalo gets off to a good start and Jacksonville is going to have to force things and not play their game, that's when they're going to get in trouble. And Jacksonville's defense is good and have a good front four. But how I look at it is I think Buffalo, Josh Allen will have the cape out. And I'm sure he realizes as he looks around the rest of the conference, knowing that, all right, we may be a 6 seed, but why not us? I think Buffalo, maybe it'll come down to the final possession, or maybe it'll come down to a field goal with about 5 minutes to go, and then Jacksonville gets the ball, and either they turn the ball over on downs or turn the ball over altogether, or have to punt it away and use their timeouts to burn, and then Buffalo runs out the clock with James Cook. But I see the Bills winning 26-23. San Francisco, Philly. As I take a sip of some juice here. I won't be surprised if the Niners just try to come out throwing the ball. I understand Christian McCaffrey. The last thing I want to do is try to run between those tackles there down in Philly. But how I look at it is that Philly, as inept as that offense has been at times this year, they're at home. I get it. They can lose this game. I really believe that they can. But I don't think their season ends there on Sunday. I'd be shocked. But I will say this. If that offense is not clicked for whatever the reason, and let's say the Niners, it's third quarter, and the Niners are up 13-6 or 13-9, they had to settle for 3 field goals, and then the Eagles get the ball coming out of the half and they go 3 and out, that crowd will turn against them. And who knows how tight that football team will be, and Sirianni, etc. That's the one thing I fear. And dare I even say, let's say if that happens to be the case, and then the Niners get the ball and they go out down the field and they punch it in the end zone, it's 20-9, San Francisco, oh, that crowd will be venomous. But I will say, I think that they'll find a way to win. I'm sure you're probably going to get another road team that's going to win this game. I know I picked Green Bay and the Rams for the first two. But I think these next two, and Buffalo I picked as well. But I think the Eagles will win at home. They'll find a way. I don't know. Maybe they'll get a late turnover or maybe something will happen along those lines. But I think the Eagles will win. That's a game where 1st to 20 is going to win. But I'll say 20-17, Philadelphia. The night game, Chargers and Patriots, I hate this game. And not because of the teams or whatever, but I just hate it that it's in the NBC primetime slot. And I get it. You have the market in Boston and the market in LA. But it's probably going to be cold. Worse because it's at night. I was hoping this game would be at 1 o'clock. But I just see this being a situation where the Charger offensive line is compromised. We know about Justin Herbert's left hand. And I think this is a tall order for the Chargers to go in there and win this game. I'm not saying this game's going to be 38-3. But I could see them clicking early, the Patriots. And then their defense, they're just going to feed off of what the offense does. And I understand the Chargers defense is good. But again, the elements and how cold it's going to be and knowing that's going to be to the advantage of the Patriots, I think New England's going to win this 24, maybe up to 27. But I can see it's like 24-13, 27-16, something along those lines. And I could talk about the Monday night game. I could also preview it on Monday on the podcast then, because obviously it's not going to be played until Monday night, and obviously we're going to reconnect before then. But I guess I'll put it this way. For everything I said about Houston, and spot on, their defense, etc., their offense would scare me just a little bit because they don't have much of a run game. Yes, they do have Nico Collins. Yes, C.J. Stroud's a very good quarterback. And the Steelers are going to have to get to him. As much as the Texan defense is going to have to get at Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers defense is going to have to do the same. Because if Stroud's going to be sitting back there all day, picking them apart, the Steelers have no shot to win this game. And this game cannot be a shootout. This game has to be played the Steeler way. They're going to try to run the ball, the Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell combo. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of packages. You're going to have DK Metcalf come back, so that's going to be an enormous addition to their team. But the Steelers are going to try to keep this under 20. And not to say that the Texans are a juggernaut offensively. Absolutely not. But again, one of the things you're going to pay attention to are the pressures and the sacks. If the Steelers could be close to what the Texans are going to do, because you figured that young Steeler offensive line, they'll find ways to blow it in a sense where Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter will find their way to Aaron Rodgers. But listen, I'm going with my gut. I can't go with my heart. I can see the Texans winning this game. Score, I don't know. Maybe 21 or 23-21, something along those lines. Somebody will go for 2 and miss that. Chances are it'll be Tomlin. I wouldn't be surprised. But that's how I'm looking at it as far as the wild card weekend goes. And looking forward to it. I'm going to pick and choose my games. Buffalo, Jacksonville, I want to see. Green Bay, Chicago, I'm not. I mean, listen, I'm going to tune into all the games. I'm not trying to say that, I'm not going to watch them. I'm going to watch reruns of Three's Company. No, I'm not going to do that. But, yeah, if I feel like a game's getting out of hand, or I feel, then that's it. I got to get off it. So, because, I don't want to see, let's say, for instance, if the Rams are up 31-10 and it's midway through the third quarter, why even bother watching the rest of the game? Now, of course, I'm going to watch, but my point is that, all right, I know I could take a break and know that with the wife, it's not going to be like, well, hey, it's 31-10, I got to watch it to the very end. And I understand they start to come back. And I get it, it's playoff football, JAYREELZ, how dare you walk away. But no, I'm just being real. I mean, come on. If I was single, living by myself, please, order food, put my feet up, and let's go. But come on, between the college, everything I said at the very top of the podcast, come on, I can't dominate the entire weekend and just be like, well, every waking second, especially when you get Saturday into Sunday. I can get away with Thursday and Friday night. But now, Saturday from 4:30 to midnight, Sunday from 1 to almost midnight. I mean, and then I'm going to, Monday night, it's the Steelers, I'm watching that. Definitely not missing a snap. I mean, come on. I got to pick and choose my battles here. So maybe I'm hoping for a blowout or 2. And with that being said, wild card weekend the last few years have been an atrocity. And I'll just go back to last year. Remember, opening round, Chargers and Texans. 5 interceptions or 4 picks by Justin Herbert. 23-6, whatever the final was. I mean, that game was a bore. Pittsburgh and Baltimore outgained at the half, 300 yards to 60. Game over. The first game, Bo Nix with a bomb. 7-0 Broncos. Bills went on a 31-0 run. Game over. The Green Bay, Philadelphia, a nondescript, just no feel type of game. What did the Eagles win? 20-12? The Sunday night game was a good game. Big fumble there late by the Bucks. Commanders scored a touchdown. They win 24-20. I think that was the final. And then the Monday night game, which had to be displaced from LA to Arizona because of the fires out in the Pacific Palisades. Sam Darnold turning the ball over, late Christmas gifts, and the Rams go away winning, what was it, 24-9, 31-9? I mean, the games were just nothing to write home about. So let's see if this year is a different theme and a different feeling to that, because if it's going to be anything to what we saw last year, even the year before that, which was terrible, where the only good game of that weekend was, if you remember, was the Rams in Detroit, which was the first time I believe Matthew Stafford went back to Detroit after the trade a few years prior to that. And he got beat up and played valiantly and was a warrior in that game until the Lions won by 1 point. So, yeah, that was the best game of the wildcard weekend. So 2 games out of 12 these last 2 years, hopefully there'll be a turnaround, because if not, I'll be off these games in a heartbeat. And as I mentioned earlier, with the Steelers and the wide right Tyler Loop, who would have thought that that was the last game that John Harbaugh would have coached in Baltimore? Was I surprised? A little bit. And I understand because the game was Sunday night and had to fly home, and I'm sure that the front office had to sit together and mull it over, yada, yada, yada. And then on Tuesday, they broke the news, and it was actually Tuesday mid to late afternoon. So it wasn't as if you wake up and you see the headline, whoa, John Harbaugh got fired. But, so that's why it was a little bit surprising, because if he got fired the next day, along the likes of Pete Carroll, Jonathan Gannon, Kevin Stefanski, then you'd be like, oh, okay, it was expected. But now the big talk is, where does John Harbaugh go? Well, before I get to that, was it time? I guess it was. 18 years. Obviously, was not successful here. Was successful regular season, but when you had a 1 seed 2 years ago and you imploded as a coach, that was just an awful game. And I always refer back to that game if you listen to the podcast, how terrible he was. So many personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conducts, even pre-snap penalties, terrible coaching. I mean, it was just brutal. And again, I'm sure they probably thought that despite his success there, winning a Super Bowl over a decade ago, it was just time to part ways. And as far as where he'll go, I know the Giants, I'm sure Arizona's going to be hot on his tail, the Vegas Raiders, which will be interesting because that means he'll be in the same division as his brother. So you'll see the Harbaugh Bowl twice a year if he does go to Las Vegas. But who knows? I know a lot of people here in New York, they want Harbaugh as their coach. And even the media, there's a guy you got to get. Don't even let him out of the building. Sign him to a contract, etc. The thing about Harbaugh, he'll give the Giants instant credibility. And Harbaugh's a special teams coach. He's not an offensive coach, as you know. But the thing about Harbaugh that I don't like is that sometimes, even with his resume and the Super Bowl, etc., he could sometimes be a deer in the headlights. And what I mean by that is that when things start to unravel and unfold, he just stands there with that blank look on his face with his eyes wide open looking around as if he's trying to find answers. And that's not a good sign. You never see him chatting it up with his players. You never see him trying to grab guys by the collar to say, hey, get your head in the game, or to rally his defense to say, we need to stop, or to get his offensive line to say, hey, come on. You never see him do that. And to me, that's not the sign of a coach that, yeah, he may have the pulse of his team, but not to the extent where he has to get in guys' faces to chew them out. Sometimes you got to be a bit of a jerk to be successful. You just can't be all lovey-dovey and kumbaya. That would be my trepidation if I'm a Giant fan signing Harbaugh. But other than that, I mean, it's a slam dunk hire. And one last thing before I move to college. I didn't talk about my over-under win totals. Do you know I was, count them, 1-5 this year? And 3 of them fell apart in the last few weeks of the season. Tampa, as I talked about, 6-2. I'm thinking, oh man, 9.5 was the over-under. All I need is 4 more wins. Right in the toilet. They got to 8. The Lions. Remember the Lions were 8-5? And you're thinking, all right, they get 2 more wins. I understand tricky schedule, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they didn't win the final game of the year, but those games in between, after beating Dallas 8-5, you're thinking, all right, great. Losing to Pittsburgh, losing to Minnesota. All right, they beat the Bears that final game. They lost. Didn't have a Sunday night game they lose to. Trying to think along the way. Off the top of my head. I think it was another game. Oh, they lost to the Rams. And therefore, 9-8, but their over-under was 10.5. At 8-5, and he had 3 more wins at 4 games. No good. And then the killer was the Falcons. 7.5 was their number. I believe they were what? Didn't they win 4 in a row to end their year? And they were 4-9. 7.5, they win 4 in a row, you get 8. That blew me up. And then think about this. The Tennessee Titans, oh, here, breaking news. Wow, look at that. Dolphins fire Coach McDaniel after 7-10 season. Now, this one I'm surprised at. And I'm going to get into that in a second. But as far as my over-unders are concerned, over-unders. Let me pull this up real quick. The Tennessee Titans, who were feisty. Now, obviously, they were still 2 games. What was that? 5.5 was their number, and they were 3-14. But even then, not to say I had to sweat out a little bit, but that was my only win. Everything else was a loss. Baltimore 11.5. New England 8.5. Over as an under. Just terrible picks. It's probably the worst I've had ever in any of the sports. Usually I'm 3-3, 4-2. One year I was 5-1 in the NBA. I think it was last year. Ugh, ugly this year. All right, let's get to McDaniel. Now, I understand that Troy Aikman, for whatever the reason, Stephen Ross is going to hire him as a consultant to bring in the next GM, or at least to be a part of the team to see who the next GM is going to be. Because remember, they fired Chris Greer in the middle of the year. And there were so many discussions and so many even reports about how McDaniel may stay in Miami only because the owner loves him, A. B, he's gotten a lot out of Tua, considering that Tua has regressed here over the last couple of years, and I get it, concussions, etc. But knowing they didn't have Tyreek Hill, and there was a major turnover on their roster dating back to last year. They even traded Jalen Phillips midseason this year. I mean, the team is a shell of itself. And considering that he survived Black Monday, and here it is Thursday, as it just came down, 30-some odd minutes ago, the news, that for them to fire McDaniel, then obviously that means they're cleaning house and they're starting over. And who knows? Maybe now they're going to be nipping at the heels of John Harbaugh at this point. Knowing that Harbaugh's available, and Stephen Ross, who I believe there is a relationship there. I thought I heard something like that over the last 24 hours. And maybe they're probably on the phone with him right now to have Stephen Ross, the private jet, go down to Miami, take him down to, although they're far from South Beach, but take him down that way, take him down to Brickell, all the restaurants, what's happening, and try to persuade Harbaugh to coach the Dolphins. I think that has something to do with it, as I'm looking at it here. Now, I don't know if that's true, if Harbaugh is going to be right now the front runner, because I believe he's going to meet up with the Giants, Arizona, maybe meet up with the Giants either today or tomorrow, Harbaugh, that is. But I'm a little surprised by that. But here's the other thing, too. Tua still has 2 more years and $100 million coming to him. And if you cut him or trade him, you still have dead cap money that's going to be on your team. And that dead cap money isn't $15, $20 million. I'm sure it's probably somewhere in the 50s or 60s. If I had to pull that up, let me just see. Maybe they have it here in the article. But McDaniel, out. He'll resurface somewhere as a coordinator. I know he's quirky, nerdy, the whole nine. But let's see. The move comes after McDaniels had met with reporters Monday. He said he would be a part of the team's interviews to hire a new general manager. Dolphins owner Stephen Ross met with McDaniel on Tuesday, discussed the season. And after that meeting and reflection, but Ross decided to move on. After careful evaluation, yada, yada, yada. Dolphins will conduct a head coaching search and general manager after a GM is in place, with a new GM expected to be hired Friday. All right? So we shall see. And then 2, I know, was part of it, saying that, yes, it would be nice if he got a fresh start. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think if the Dolphins were to do that, they'll have to eat a ton of that money, as you know. And Tua, we know, is limited. I mean, what more can you say? He has to be in the perfect offense. He's got to be in that West Coast offense, get the ball, timing, have a 5-yard pass in the seam or a 5-yard in become a 70-yard touchdown. So, yeah, here it is. The Dolphins have not yet been in touch with Harbaugh or anyone in this camp. McDaniel told Darlington that the decision to move away from McDaniel was independent of Harbaugh's. All right, so they're saying, and McDaniel is... Oh, a source close to the decision that fire McDaniel. All right. So, yeah, they're not saying that, oh, the reason why we fired him is not because of the availability of John Harbaugh. All right, let me move on to the college. I know I spent a ton of time in the NFL, and rightfully so, because the other sports, there's not really much to unpack, although, of course, I will get to the NBA, NHL, and some baseball. College football. Tonight, Miami-Ole Miss. Tomorrow, Oregon, Indiana. To me, here are the cases for these teams winning a national championship. I'll start with Miami. They're a 10 seed. Low seed left. I'm sure all the Hurricanes are coming out. You saw Michael Irvin and Ray Lewis on the sidelines there against Ohio State. You mean to tell me there's probably going to be a ton more? You're going to see Clinton Portis. You're going to see Edgerrin James. You're going to see everybody and their grandmother. Who knows? Maybe even Jim Kelly, Vinny Testaverde will head on down to check out this semifinal game. So you know that the Hurricanes are going to be well represented. But we know about the defensive front, the 2 guys there with the Akeem Mesidor as well as Reuben Bain Jr. Carson Beck, who has a pedigree, more so with Georgia. Don't know what you're going to get from him. But Miami trying to get themselves back, and I'm sure they've seen all the guys on campus or in Coral Gables over the last week or so. Hey, guys, we'll be there. So there's a lot of, I'm sure, bravado. Maybe not like the old Hurricane teams of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but I'm sure that they already have been put on notice that the Hurricanes are going to show up and they're going to be fully backed and packed to the rim on that sideline to make sure that the Hurricanes get themselves to a national title and win. And that's how I look at it. Because besides that, I understand, they'll run the ball a little bit, but it's not a dynamic offense in the least. Obviously, we talked about those 2 defensive linemen that could just wreck a game. But with that karma, the old swag with the new swag, they certainly have a shot. How I feel about Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss, a little bit of a magic carpet ride, similar to Miami, but a much different feel. But here's the other thing, as I said weeks ago, and I'll say it one more time. Maybe they are looking at that Lane Kiffin departure to try to stick it to him to be like, all right, you left us? Well, this is what we're going to do. And look what they did against Georgia. Came from behind, win the game. Even though Georgia had to come back there late, tie the game, but we saw what Ole Miss had done. And I think that karma is also helping them. The why not us? Just because our coach left doesn't mean that, we're just going to fold. We're just going to take our ball and go home. Absolutely not. All right, we saw that with Tulane as expected. But here they were up against Georgia, who a lot of people thought, including yours truly, were going to win the national title. And they ended up beating them. So why not them? Now, as far as Oregon goes, their head coach can have a lot of bluster. But the one thing I think about, and I understand it's a different sport, but hear me out. Remember the year where Virginia lost in the first round? And this was in 2017. They lost in the first round of the tournament. And people were just outraged. Oh, I can't believe it. 16 beat a 1. Virginia, what a bust. And then what did they do the next year? They came back and won a title. Now, Oregon, again, this isn't March Madness. But Oregon last year, and I get it was Ohio State, but 1 seed, top seed, raring to go. They were out of the game at halftime. Oh, I think it was like 30-0, whatever it was. Oregon was unprepared. Oregon had no shot once Ohio State came flying out of the gate. And now this year, because they've been able to play a couple of games, and here they are at this point to where they're going up against a team that they know well, that actually beat them earlier this year. And on top of all that, when you look at what the team has been so far with these matchups that we saw in the regular season to the postseason, what has happened? Oklahoma beat Alabama in the regular season. Alabama beat Oklahoma in the opening round. Georgia beat Ole Miss back in October. What happened? Ole Miss beat Georgia. And now Oregon losing to Indiana in their building. And here's the rematch. And I'm sure Lanny's going to say, hey, we don't have a shot. Nobody's going to pick us to win. It's all about Indiana, the Heisman Trophy winner. And who knows, you may have the number 1 and number 2 picks here going up against one another. With Dante Moore for Oregon and obviously the reigning Heisman Trophy winner and Fernando Mendoza. So you got that. And then for Indiana, I mean, it's obvious. 1 seed, Kurt Signetti, the Heisman Trophy winner. They dominated Alabama, and they're just going to walk through everybody to get their first ever. And who would have thought? We think of Indiana, you think about the basketball team, not even football, and Indiana will be a national title or championship. It's interesting. There's your case for all 4 teams. As far as the games go, I think if anybody had to choose what would be the best matchup, I'm sure a lot of people would want to see Ole Miss and Indiana. I don't know if people want to see Oregon there in the final game. I think people would want to see Indiana get to a championship and win or lose, depending on who you are. So I think Indiana would have to be there, although the good college football fan wouldn't care. But just for the good sports fan, the average sports fan that's not into college football but watches and follows from afar, I think they want to see Indiana there. And I'd almost get the impression that Miami, because of what they've stood for and their brand, the U, I'm sure they want to see them. But I think the better game would be Ole Miss, because Ole Miss will be able to put up points against them. And I understand they got the defensive players there in Miami that can wreck a game. I get that. But I think Ole Miss and of course, everything I mentioned about the Lane Kiffin not being there and what that would mean for the school after his departure, etc., I think that would be the sexier game. The sexier matchup would be Miami-Indiana because of the brand and Indiana and what they're striving for. But as far as the games itself, to me, it's going to boil down to the line of scrimmage. And yes, we could say that for every football game for that matter, but I think with Ole Miss and Miami, even more so, because if Miami's going to do anything offensively, they're going to have to run the ball, which means their offensive line is going to have to be punishing. And of course, their defensive line, if they're going to get to Trinidad Chambliss and knock him around and try to get to him as best as they possibly can, that dynamic duo is going to have to do anything and everything it takes to try to get to the Ole Miss quarterback. That's what I think it's going to boil down to. We could talk about, X factors and this. No, I think the line of scrimmage, whomever dominates that, is going to win the game. And I think in this case, it's weird. I'm not a Miami Hurricane fan. I don't have an allegiance to any college football team. I would like to see Miami there because they'll bring a lot of nostalgia. And I understand nostalgia doesn't win football games, but I'm sure you're going to see a ton of ex-Hurricanes there tonight. Hurricane alum, etc. But I think Ole Miss, something tells me, man, because of that Kiffin departure and because they are playing, and both of these teams are playing with house money when you think about it, but I think Ole Miss is going to prevail here. What did I see? What did I pick my score at? Yeah, and I get it. Defense, the whole nine. I think they're going to prevail. I think they're going to win 23-19. And as far as Oregon, Indiana, I will say this. the Ducks and Lanning, they're not going to be afraid of the Hoosiers. They're not. They've played them. They know them. They have that revenge factor, Indiana pressure. And I've said this a million times. I want to see, and I hope to see, because you want to see a competitive game. You don't want to see Indiana 31-10 midway through the third quarter. I want to see Oregon up 20-10 with 3 minutes left in the third quarter, kicking off to Indiana. Now, there's still a quarter and change to go. I get that. It's not fourth quarter. But I want to see how they perform in that spot. Because that's what you want to see from a team that's undefeated, a team that's ranked number one. You want to see them with a little pressure. You don't want to see them cakewalk through this whole thing. And I think that the combination of that pressure, if they do face that, Oregon not being afraid, and Lanning, hopefully he'll push all the right buttons. I'm going to pick the Ducks to win. And I'm going to go on the theme, as I said before. The team that has won in the regular season has not been able to beat that team twice in the same year. I'm picking the Ducks 26-23. I know I came this close to picking the Canes, but I don't know. That Ole Miss magic carpet ride, right now it's pretty strong. But that is your college football. I'm looking forward to it, all the football for that matter, as we get set to watch it all unfold here over the next 5 nights. All right, now let me zoom through some NBA stuff. As far as the league overall, with standings and stats and things of that nature, and I know the Pistons, they beat up on the Knicks the other night to show who's boss there. And Oklahoma City, how in the hell? I mean, to think that they lost at home to the Charlotte Hornets, and they didn't lose to them by a late 3 or by 5. They lost to them by almost 30. What was it, 124-97? And I get it. Teams are entitled to have an off night, but at home against Charlotte? Ugh, that was awful. But to me, the big news here of the week was Trae Young getting traded. And just last night to the Wizards. And I guess the Wizards was his preferred destination. God bless him. Because how many times have we seen these players, oh, I want to get traded to this team. Oh, I want to go to play with these guys. Oh, I want to go and rock in this city. No. I understand he has a connection there, a Wizard executive who was a guy who was part of the front office of Atlanta when they drafted him back in 2017 or 2018. And maybe that bond was so strong that, hey, I want to go to Washington. I want to resuscitate that franchise. I want to be the leader there. I guess things got kind of bland there in Atlanta for him. And who knows, maybe he heard whispers, rumblings, considering his health. And obviously he doesn't play defense and his size, despite the fact that he has a big heart. The guy plays with a lot of heart. He's fearless. That's what you love in a player. But when you're as small as he is, and you got bigger guards and bigger people that there's no way you can defend, that's going to be tough. But he wanted to go to Washington, and they only gave up C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert. Now, I get it. That's more of a salary dump because he would have been a free agent. I believe he has a player opt out after this year, but obviously he's going to sign to a big-time extension. But surprising at Washington, and maybe it's because of that executive, like I said, and what they gave up for him was really nothing. So it's not as if they netted a bunch of first-round picks or young talent, etc. But pretty much what the Wizards are doing here are trying to rebuild their organization, obviously with their personnel. They know that they're going to have some draft capital. They know that they're going to eye for the end of the decade and beyond. And even though at 27 years of age, which he's still right about entering his prime, and even though, again, he's a liability on a couple of themes here, whether it's his health, as he hasn't played much this year, or on the defensive side of the court, for what they gave up, listen, I wouldn't have done it because I like Trae Young as a player, but again, he's a guy, I don't want to say he floats in and out of these games, but you like to have him a little bit taller, and I can't hate to say it that way, but it's true. You want him to have a little bit more size. How about that? Not just because he's short, and I understand that's implied in that way, but it's not. You like for him to have a little bit more size, and he doesn't have that. So let's see. Kudos to the Wizards for making this trade to have Trae Young as a building block for the young players, and I don't know how much of a veteran leadership he's going to provide to this Wizard team. And to me, it is a trade for the next 2-3 years. This isn't for right now because it's not as if the Wizards are going to make a run by any stretch. They're 10-28. They've been wallowing at the bottom of the conference for eons. And yes, they did. I believe they were in a playing game. What was it, 3-4 years ago? They played the Celtics in that one game. I think that was, 2022 maybe. But, yeah. As a matter of fact, let me just double check that. I have to go back to Washington Wizard playoff history. So let's see. Now, is anybody going to be paying attention from afar? I don't think so because, again, it's basketball. Well, maybe Charlotte is basketball Siberia, but not far behind, I hate to say it, are the Wizards. And maybe this is a step in the right direction for this organization. And you're going to take what you can, knowing that a guy like Young, he's not going to be box office. Yes, I'm sure the fan base, when they look at the trade, they gave up nothing for him. But they want this guy to remain healthy and be a part of the team. So therefore, they're going to hope and pray that he could be an efficient scorer and obviously be that guy that's going to be the floor general of this team. And then hope that it's a situation where they can look to the future, continue to build through the draft, and hopefully by the end of the decade into the following, that they could be a team that's not only relevant, but maybe a team that could make some hay. And that's it. Let's see. I'm still looking at the playoff stuff, which I'll have to get back to. But I remember in that playoff, that one year, the play-in tournament, that I remember them playing the Celtics. And I think that was in the 22 season. But other than that, the NBA, again, there isn't anything else I could unpack. What? I'll go through the schedule in a minute for the weekend, but yeah, looking here, I mean, geez, it is slim pickings. No teams have been on any type of considerable winning streak or losing streak. So, sadly, unless you're Utah, Sacramento, or the Pelicans, losers of 5, 6, and 9 games respectively. And then the Pacers, 6-31. Who would have thought that Tyrese Halliburton injury, and I'm not trying to make Tyrese Halliburton to be Michael Jordan, but did that injury really decimate this team? And I understand they lost Miles Turner too, but all right, I expected them to be bad. But 6-31 bad? Not in the least. Schedule for the upcoming few days. Tonight, Indiana, Charlotte, Miami, Chicago, Cleveland, Minnesota, Dallas, Utah. Tomorrow, yeah, you have no Amazon, none of that. I guess maybe the college football had something to do with it. Toronto at Boston, not bad. Philly, Orlando. Clippers in Brooklyn. Clippers lost last night to the Knicks, so they're in town over the next couple days. OKC at Memphis. Atlanta at Denver, who beat the Celtics last night. Knicks in Phoenix. Sacramento, Golden State. Houston, Portland, Milwaukee at LA to face the Lakers. That's on NBA TV, so that's a good game there. Saturday, your Prime Video at 1 o'clock. Minnesota, Cleveland. That's a random Prime Video game. Clippers in Detroit. Miami, Indiana. San Antonio at Boston. Dallas, Chicago, Charlotte, Utah. And then Sunday, New Orleans, Orlando. Brooklyn, Memphis. Philly, Toronto. New York, Portland. San Antonio, Minnesota. Miami, OKC. Milwaukee, Denver. Washington, Phoenix. Atlanta, Golden State. Houston, Sacramento. That's what you got there with the NBA. As far as the NHL goes, as I lace up my skates, break up the Avalanche. They've lost 2 regulation games in a row. Think about that. They lost, as we talked about there Sunday, they lost in Florida to the Panthers 2-1, but then 2 nights later in Tampa, they lost 4-2. Wait a minute. What's happening in Colorado? I jest, of course. I mean, they're allowed to lose 2 in a row. The team started off, 31-2-7, I think it was? Or no. Sure, I might get my math correct. 31-2 is 33. Yeah, something like that. 31-2-7. And now they're 31-4-7. We talked about that on Monday as far as them being on pace for the most points in the regular season, where the Bruins broke that a couple of years ago, and we saw what that got the Bruins. A first-round exit up 3-1 to the Florida Panthers, as we know. But yeah, as I take a look around the league, it's pretty much the same as the NBA. there isn't anything else to really discuss. I mean, we could talk about Tampa. They've won 8 in a row, funny enough, as they beat the Lightning there a couple of nights ago. And now they're 1 point ahead of both Montreal and Detroit. Tied there at second place in the Atlantic. Islanders shut out the Devils 9-0. What was that about their Jersey Devils? In embarrassing fashion in that game, as the Islanders are 3 points behind the Hurricanes. Flyers 1 point behind the Islanders. Caps 2 points behind them. And Colorado, a 9-point lead on the Stars. And then out West, Vegas, Edmonton tied at 48. One more time, people. Nothing to really unpack. Here's one thing now that I see this. Remember the Winnipeg Jets last year? They started off 8-0. They lost the game. Then they won 7 straight after that. They were 15-1. And they had the most points, won the President's Trophy last year, as you know, but they got ousted in the second round. And had to sweat hard in the first round against St. Louis to come from behind the last minute to tie and then win in overtime. Well, they have now lost 10 in a row. They're in last place in the Central Division, 15-21-5. And I know they lost some key pieces, Nikolai Ehlers to the to the Carolina Hurricanes, among others. But yeah, talk about from one year to the next, similar to Indiana and what they've done, but at least they went to a final. Winnipeg didn't even get to a conference final, even with their lofty numbers last year. So something to think about there. And then as far as the schedule for the weekend, Calgary at Boston, Florida, Montreal, Vancouver, Detroit, Buffalo, New York, Rangers that is, Toronto, Philly, Jersey, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, Carolina, New York at Nashville, Islanders that is, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Colorado, Columbus, Vegas, Seattle, hosting Minnesota. Tomorrow, Washington, Chicago, LA, Winnipeg, St. Louis, and Utah. Let me just go through the games that matter. 1 o'clock, Saturday, ABC game, New York at Boston. Didn't we see that the day after Thanksgiving? And I think the Rangers won that game. And no Igor Shesterkin on the IR there with a leg injury. I don't know how long he's going to be out. As a matter of fact, I'll take a look at that in a second. Calgary at Pittsburgh, Columbus, Colorado. All right, let me just talk about games of note. San Jose's played well. I got to give it up. San Jose's been just fantastic. And speaking of which, did you see the fight the other night between Ryan Reeves and Matthew Olivier? Olivier, right now, he's probably got the heavyweight belt. And I understand that Ryan Reeves is long in the tooth. He's 38 years of age. But Olivier could be the toughest and probably the best fighter in the league, which isn't saying much in this day and age because you really have about 5 good fighters that are out there. Reeves, Olivier, Curtis McDermott, Nicholas Delorier. I know I'm missing a couple others. Matt Rempe. I know I'm missing one. Well, without going any further. So it's not as if, and listen, sometimes you had 5 tough guys on one team. Now, I understand it's 35, 40 years ago. Just think of the Flyers. Craig Berube, Dave Brown, Jeff Chikrin, Darryl Stanley, Dave Richter. I mean, forget about it. Rick Tocchet. Let's see, Saturday's games. Detroit and Montreal. That's your Hockey Night in Canada game, I would think. Tampa at Philly. Seattle, Carolina. Islanders at Minnesota. LA at Edmonton. St. Louis at Vegas. And then Sunday, Jersey at Winnipeg. Pittsburgh, Boston. Washington, Nashville. Columbus, Utah. Vegas at San Jose. And San Jose's played very well. I got to give it up. What do they start off? 0-5-2. And here they are. What is their record right now? Before I move on to baseball. They are 22-18-3. And they started off their year, as I pull up their full schedule. They started off the year. I take that back. They started off 0-6. Now, they won in overtime. Was that in the shootout? No, that was in overtime. No overtime loss. So they started their year off 1-7. And since then, they have gone, for all intents and purposes, 21-11-3. I mean, that's a tremendous job. Listen, and that's a young team, a lot of young players. I mean, that is just terrific. And good for them as they continue to move it along here. And look, Macklin Celebrini extends his point streak to 12 games. He's had a monster year, too. Good for him. And that's what you got in the NHL. And then last week, the baseballs again in the batter's box. I'll wrap it up here. I know I didn't talk about the Japanese players that signed recently, which is Tatsuya Imai signing with the Astros 3 years, for, I believe it was, what, 75 million? What did I write down here? No, 54 million. My apologies. And then you have to think, bye-bye Bichette in Toronto, because Toronto signed that Japanese third baseman, Kazuma Okamoto, 5 years, 60 million. And he actually hit one more home run than Munetaka Murakami, who signed with the White Sox a couple of weeks back. So I would think and Bichette didn't play third base, but he's an infielder, so who knows. And listen, if I'm Toronto, and they made some moves here this offseason, I would do what I can to keep Bichette. He's a hitting machine. He actually showed a lot of toughness there, coming back from that knee injury in the World Series in, Game 5, and he was still raking all over the place, including a 3-run homer to start off Game 7 off of Ohtani. I mean, listen, that guy could play on my team any day of the week, but I don't know if Toronto, if it's in the cards for him to come back. But you did have a big trade. It's very low-key, though, but big trade for the Cubs as they try to get themselves a rotation that's going to be steady, if not spectacular. They traded with the Marlins for Edward Cabrera, and he's a guy that when he's healthy, he's very good. He's had a lot of injury history, though, throughout his career, and he still has 3 more years of service, which is even a bigger deal. But they gave up a big-time outfield prospect who I believe is ranked number 2 in the system, 46th in the top 100, and I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's Owen Casey, or it could be Kaisi. I don't know, C-A-I-S-S-I-E. First time I'm ever hearing about this guy. And 2 other hitting prospects. So for whatever that's worth, now they didn't get a pitcher back, which I was a little bit puzzled because I thought maybe they get a pitcher back in the process. You get a good prospect, position player, maybe a pitcher as well. But with Max Meyer, Yuri Perez, Sandy Alcantara, who knows, he could be traded. And then I don't even know what happened to Sixto Sanchez. He's a guy that was supposed to be with a lot of promise, but I know he had Tommy John. He's had shoulder issues. He's had all types of injuries. But I get it that they probably looked at Cabrera as a guy that with 3 more years left, he's already arbitration eligible. Marlins don't want to pay 1 more red cent than they absolutely have to. And with Perez and Meyer as the top of that rotation, they also have a good lefty too. I'm not thinking Marlin baseball right now, but they also have a good left-handed pitcher. See if I can pull him up too. But the Marlins, listen, they're going to try to build for the future. We know that. They're not a team that is going to wheel and deal and try to sign a bunch of these, whether it's their own players that could be free agents or free agents from other teams. But the Cubs, I thought, made a real big move. Is it Ryan Weathers? No, I don't think it's Ryan Weathers. Nah, maybe Ryan Weathers. I don't think it's him. But anyway, so that's the deal there with the Marlins and the Cubs as they try to keep themselves in the mix there in the National League and especially in the Central, where they made it to the postseason, but of course lost in that second round, divisional round, to the Brewers after beating the Padres in the first round. So that's what you have with the baseball. And yes, we're still waiting for those guys to sign. I'm not going to say that's all blue in the face. We're now less than 5 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. So as we move it along, we shall see. And that'll do it. Another episode in the books, people. I appreciate you as always stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what happens in the wonderful world, the toy department of life called sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, my YouTube channel, @JAYREELZ. Please. I'm getting close, people. About 40 some odd away from 1,000 subscribers, which means I'm getting that much closer to monetize. But I don't want to stop there. I'm going to keep going. You already know. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I would sincerely appreciate it. And take a screenshot. Send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Hey, this guy does sports. He also does some other content too. Please, if you could do that. And if you want to hit me up on any of my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast. Also on Instagram, JAYREELZ. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. On Twitch, JAYREELZ1, just a number. And the old-fashioned way to JAYREELZpodcast@gmail.com. If you have a question, comment, suggestion, or even some critique or praise, whichever one that may be, please hit me up. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood and the DNA. It's almost going on 2 years since I've been doing this full time. And I'm trying to generate income. I'm trying to generate a buzz. I'm trying to increase the visibility of my channel, of this podcast, etc. Because where else are you going to get all these sports in one podcast? Where else are you going to get nothing but true sports talk, passionate sports talk, real sports talk, Not that clickbait, rage bait nonsense where you see the title and the thumbnail and you get hoodwinked and you get reeled in and you're like, hey, what was this? This was garbage. You're not going to get any of that with yours truly. I can promise you that. Because as long as I'm alive and breathing, sitting in front of this camera and microphone, as I like to say, it's in the blood and the DNA, talking sports since birth, I promise I'll deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.